From Studio A of Arlington Community Media, it's The Electricity Show. And here's your host, Barry Pulmeter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you and welcome. Welcome to The Electricity Show, the show in which we explore our relationship with the energy we consume. I am your host, Barry Pulmeter. I'm a 19-year resident of Arlington and a 25-year veteran of the energy industry. The objective of The Electricity Show is to inform and educate our viewing audience about the energy-related issues you experience and read about in the news. The show is based on the fundamental premise that if you provide people with good, honest information, you often will be pleasantly surprised at the quality of decisions they make. The importance of providing good information on energy-related issues is heightened in today's world, where it seems as though the news is continually filled with stories about skyrocketing electricity prices, about a process called fracking that can provide new sources of natural gas, about the need for new gas pipelines to bring this newly available gas into the region, and about the need for cleaner sources of electricity, including hydroelectric power that would be transported from Canada. These stories likely make your head spin. Well, have no fears, The Electricity Show is here to help you. Over our series of shows, we will explore all of these issues, as well as many others. And we promise to do it in a fun and entertaining way, playing some music and having some laughs along the way. The Electricity Show takes place in a classroom setting in which our awesome studio audience, give yourself a hand, our audience plays the roles of students. The show is divided into three segments. We start off with Electricity 101, in which we attempt to demystify the commodity we call electricity. We then bring out an expert guest who shares with us his or her wealth of knowledge in the energy field in a segment that we call Experts Corner. Finally, we end the show with Fun with Bills, in which we explore energy-related issues through the lens of our monthly electric bill. Throughout the show, our studio audience, in their role as students, is encouraged to participate fully in the discussion, asking questions, requesting clarification, and providing feedback. The assumption being that the questions asked by our studio audience will be ones that would be asked by our viewing audience. The motivation behind the Electricity Show can be stated in two words: climate change. There is little doubt in my mind that the effects of climate change will represent one of the greatest challenges that our generation and future generations will face for years to come. There is also little doubt in my mind that the increasing concerns about climate change will pose significant challenges to the energy industry. In Massachusetts, we are required by law to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases in year 2050 to a level that is 80% below that of 1990 levels. Meeting these targets will require not only a fundamental change in the types of energy resources upon which we rely to fuel our economy, but a fundamental change in the way that we as energy consumers use those resources. It is in this context that the Electricity Show takes on the bold mission of being your one-stop shopping source of information on energy-related issues so that we are all better prepared to explore our relationship with the energy we consume. Thank you.
Funding for The Electricity Show is provided by EE-Date, the only online dating service designed specifically for the energy enthusiast. Put a jolt into your love life with EE-Date. Now, back to The Electricity Show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is Electricity 101, the segment of the show in which we attempt to demystify the commodity we call electricity. We do so by identifying the core components that comprise the electric service received and comparing them to the core components of a commodity with which we have great familiarity: milk. Now, to make this analogy really work, we look at the milk industry not as it's structured today, but as it may have been structured about 125 years ago in the late 1800s. Now, both electricity and milk, like other commodities, have a supply component in which the commodity is produced. Electricity is produced by power plants, fired by fossil fuels, renewable resources, nuclear power. Milk is produced by cows. As with other commodities, electricity and milk have a delivery component, the component in which the commodity is transported from where it's produced to where it's used. Electricity is transported through the electric wire. For milk, and remember this is the late 1800s, the mode of transportation is the milk bottle. Finally, as with all commodities, electricity and milk have a billing component, which comprises a few different things. Here we're going to focus on the measuring part of it. You have to measure how much of a commodity is used so you can collect money. Electricity usage is measured by the electric meter. Milk usage, that is the number of bottles that are delivered to our doorsteps, is measured or was measured in the late 1800s by the milkman. So class, let's summarize. Electric power plants equals milk cows. Electric wires equals milk bottles. And the electric meter equals the milkman. Any questions so far? You follow me? Helpful? Very nice. Everybody's nodding. I like that. So the structure of the electric industry underwent a fundamental change about 15 years ago. Conveniently, and to help us out with our milk analogy, this same type of change occurred in the milk industry in the late 1800s. To help us understand these changes, I turn to a book that my great-grandfather, Dante Perlmutter, who's somewhere in this picture, right here, Dante Perlmutter, a book he wrote about 100 years ago. It is a children's book that my parents would read to me almost every night as I lay in bed. The book is titled, "Mommy, Why Can't I Drink More Milk? The Milk Price Spike of 1915. I read from the book. Chapter 1. For as long as folks could remember, the milk they drank came from the Massachusetts Milk Company, your one and only milk company. Through the late 1800s, the Massachusetts Milk Company was what we call a monopoly, which means that we had no choice but to buy all of our milk from the company. The Massachusetts Milk Company owned, late 1800s, owned all the cows, employed all of the dairy farmers that tended to the cows, owned all the bottles and milk carts, and employed all of the milkmen that delivered the milk directly to our homes. This arrangement seemed to work quite well. The milk tasted good, it was delivered reliably to our doorsteps, and because the Massachusetts Milk Company was a monopoly, the government required that the company sell its milk to us at reasonable and stable prices. However, as the 1800s were coming to a close and the 1900s were beckoning, there was a change of brewing in the milk industry. For one thing, the dairy farmers started to complain about having to work for the Massachusetts Milk Company. They didn't understand why they couldn't buy their own cows, operate their own farms, and sell their own milk directly to consumers. The way they figured it, the milk would taste just as good as that supplied by the Massachusetts Milk Company. And because the dairy farmers would be competing against each other for customers, they would sell their milk at prices lower than the prices set by the government. Now these arguments struck quite a chord with politicians in the late 1800s, and so after great debate, the Massachusetts legislature passed the Milk Restructuring Act, which required the Massachusetts Milk Company to sell its cows and farms to the dairy farmers, who could then sell their milk directly to us milk drinkers. Now, the dairy farmers had no interest in delivering the milk to our homes. That would require them to invest in milk bottles and milk carts and employ milkmen. They were more than happy to let the Massachusetts Milk Company continue to provide these delivery services. So beginning in the 1900s, we could buy our milk directly from the dairy farmers. The Massachusetts Milk Company would bottle the milk for the farmers, place them on the milk carts, and have their milkmen deliver their milk directly to our doorsteps. Now, it was understood that, at least early on, most of us would want to continue to buy our milk from the Massachusetts Milk Company. After all, that's what we had been doing all our lives. And we weren't exactly sure whether we could trust these new farmers. So it was agreed that the Massachusetts Milk Company would continue to provide basic milk service for those customers that did not buy their milk directly from the dairy farmers. Because the Massachusetts Milk Company no longer owned any cows, it purchased the milk from the dairy farmers for resale. And as always, the Massachusetts Milk Company delivered the milk to our doorsteps. This system seemed to be working pretty well. The milk continued to taste good, continued to be delivered reliably to our homes, and the price of milk continued to be reasonable and stable. Then came the winter of 1915 and the great milk price spike. But that, class, is a story for another day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Before we bring on our expert guest, we're going to have a word from our sponsors.
Cars that pass me on the left, closely followed by my troubles when it's the right time for me to ride. There's no clouds up in the sky, no drops of rain fall down on my head. It's the right time for me to ride. You don't know me, I know myself.
Funding for the Electricity Show is provided by Electricity 101, the online course offered only by Professor Pohlmeter and available only through Pohlmeter University. Pohlmeter University training our students to use yesterday's technologies to solve tomorrow's problems. And now, time for Experts Corner.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome to Experts Corner, the segment of the show in which we bring out a guest who has a wealth of experience in the energy field and do a deep dive into his or her area of expertise. I have known tonight's guest, Fran, for about 15 years. He's worked in the energy industry for about 35 years and currently works for a consulting firm focusing on issues related to what we call distributed generation. Please give a big round of applause to my very good friend, Fran Cummings. Thank you, Fran. Have a seat. Thank you, Fran, for joining us. Before we get started, why don't you give us a little background about yourself, what motivated you to pursue a career in the energy industry, what kind of work you've done throughout your career, and a lead up to what kind of stuff you're doing right now.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here. I have been working in energy forever. Actually started about at the time of the Arab oil embargo. I was doing a project on the breakup of AT&T at a consulting company, and that's sort of a thread that will emerge again if you hadn't already picked it up in what Barry was saying about the milk analogy. But the energy industry was in crisis because of the oil embargo, which led to lots of studies of how to reduce energy use, particularly oil use, of course. And then I worked in a little startup to try to start the energy audit business, which we actually tried to charge people money to do energy audits, and we sort of were making it up as we went along. That didn't last too long in that particular venture. But then I ended up doing some work for a renewable energy development company, which was mostly focusing on hydropower in the 1980s. Then during the 1990s, I worked on the restructuring of the electric industry with Barry often. And at the time, we were focused on introducing competition in the generation business. I really only began to realize that the distributed generation business was completely different at about the year 2000, when I actually was doing some research on fuel cells, which at the time we thought was right around the corner. And so I was excited because my house was heated with an old oil furnace, and I thought, these people are going to sell me a fuel cell. And that didn't happen. But a lot of the same issues about how you can generate your own electricity, either at your home or for big industrial facilities, really fascinated me, and so I've been studying them ever since.
So why don't we talk a little about distributed generation? I know that sort of is a great interest of yours.
Yes.
Talk about what it is and how it's evolved over the past bunch of years.
Well, I mentioned the large factories. Gillette would be an example, for instance. We have a big Gillette plant in Boston, South Boston, and they were very early in generating their own electricity for that plant. They used to buy oil, and now they buy mostly gas. They generate their own electricity. And because they could generate it right there on site, they could use the heat as steam and then use the byproduct electricity. So beginning to use the two of those together turns out to be way more efficient because you're not having to throw out a lot of the waste heat, which most of our big power plants actually do. So that really was the beginning of customers generating their own electricity. They still do that. For instance, Harpoon Brewery, which is not far from Gillette in Boston, just within the last 2 or 3 years installed a combined heat and power plant, which is essentially the same technology. It's a little more modern, a much more smaller scale. So they make beer with some of their own electricity that they generate with the heat they need for the beer process. So it's still happening. But one of the exciting developments is solar energy. Back in the 80s, when you saw solar collectors, they were mostly generating hot water for people to use to wash dishes and everything else. Nowadays, most of those solar collectors you see are generating electricity. So they're sort of doing what Gillette used to do. They don't have to generate steam, of course, so they're just generating electricity. But it's very clean, and it's being generated right there on site. So you're not having to sort of lose electricity in the whole process of generating it from all over New England and bringing it across all the wires to everyone's house. So I thought the other day, well, we're seeing it everywhere. How much solar are we really getting in Massachusetts? And there's data on all the interconnections. Every time somebody puts solar up, they have to get permission from the utility company. And there's a lot of data on that, which my company actually has a database for. And from about 2010, there was almost no solar, very, very little. In 2014, it has sort of got shot up so that now about 1 in 250 homes in Massachusetts generate their own electricity with solar, which is quite a lot. But at the same time, that tells you right off there's a lot more houses that could generate locally that way. So that kind of is the good news and the bad news. The good news is we got tons of it relative to where we were before. But the bad news is it's really only about 1% or 1.5% of our electric energy in Massachusetts.
So as I mentioned earlier to the class, I always like to think of where we are now. So Fran's done a great job getting us to the current point in time. Maybe the vision for the future, I think for a lot of people, is solar on all homes and maybe really reduce our reliance on these centralized power plants. Do you see us getting there? And if so, maybe really how close can we get there? And what's that path?
Yeah. Well, I think it's not going to be every home. Partly some homes are just oriented wrong or don't have any land. Or are they're really shaded to the point where you just couldn't cut down a lot of trees. But for those houses, you have the ability now to build solar somewhere else, and the home can buy solar energy from the larger solar farm, which might be built on an old landfill, for instance, nearby, through net metering, which we could talk about. It's a little technical. But if you look into the projections of how are we going to get our climate emissions down, our greenhouse gas emissions down for the climate, the projections of solar are maybe 5 times what we're currently using right now in Massachusetts, this would be nationwide. And there are parts of the country where really they're not using solar at all. So that would be a lot more. But there are other projections where solar, including the distributed generation on people's houses and buildings, but also the bigger solar plants, not only on landfills, but also like out west, they have the ability to collect huge amounts of solar with mirrors and generate hot water with it. That might have to be maybe 45% of all the electricity that we generate in the country. But that couldn't probably happen until 2050 or something like that.
Right.
So it's not right away.
So, and as again I mentioned, talking to the class, our students, I always like to think of the role of the competitive market. You know, I believe that with the challenges we face, we need people to come up with creative, innovative solutions. And from my perspective, that's going to come in large part from the competitive market. So how much has the competitive market contributed? How much has government subsidies or government programs that assist contributed? And what kind of information do customers have to make good decisions from their perspective?
Yeah, well, it's a combination. I think the technology had begun to become more cost effective. I mean, if you look at the curves, there are all these, costs have been coming down for years. But in Massachusetts, it really was the energy policies that were introduced by the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Green Communities Act, which was legislation was passed in 2008. And it took a couple of years, but by 2010, it really started to take off. And so I think the state policy was just a huge factor. There were subsidies. Many people in the solar industry say that those subsidies are essentially justified by all the benefits that solar energy provides, including reducing losses on the transmission system and improving the potentially improving reliability on the distribution system. But now that these policies have had some time to work, the costs are continuing to come down, and projections are that pretty soon policies or no policies, subsidies or no subsidies, solar will be sort of not too cheap to meter, like they said about nuclear way back, but competitive and on its own trajectory to essentially to displace fossil fuel.
Very nice. Do we have any questions? Again, yes, Nancy.
I had a couple of questions. How does Massachusetts compare to other states in its development of solar energy? Where would it rank? And then also, where does the United States rank compared to other developed countries in its use of and development of solar energy?
Well, Massachusetts is ranked very highly on a sort of per capita basis. We're a relatively small state. California has more solar energy than pretty much anybody else. They also have had state policies that are encouraging it. But Massachusetts is, maybe 2 or 3 in terms of the most solar per capita. So we've sort of rocketed into the lead on that basis. Germany, oddly enough, is a place where there is very high solar penetration, despite the fact that they don't have any sun to speak of in Germany, because the government saw the benefits and has been subsidizing it very heavily. Europe, in general, is ahead of the United States. China is now beginning to be a serious investor in both solar and wind energy. They are still building coal plants too, because they're just going, crazy with energy and manufacturing in general. But they are beginning to be leaders in clean energy.
Okay.
Just in terms of the total amount that they can put in the ground.
I think we have another question from our class.
Hi, well, you brought up wind, and I'm curious as to whether you think that wind energy will rise as well as solar to be as distributed personally on people's houses, and what the future looks like for wind.
Yes, that's a really good question. I am not very optimistic that we're going to see wind on every house, kind of like we've been seeing with solar, partly because the ability to generate electricity from wind is not linear. That you need a lot of wind, and when you get wind up, like 20 mile an hour on a regular basis, you can really generate a lot of electricity. But Arlington Hill, perhaps, might be a great location, but down along Mass Ave, there's probably not enough wind, so that it would take a lot of technology development and cost reduction to make wind competitive sort of in the valleys in Massachusetts. But wind is very economic in the plains, in the Midwest, in the United States, and on mountain ridges and on the coast. The coast is a tough place to build anything, but offshore wind is beginning to take root, even though Cape Wind didn't make it. There's another wind farm that's under construction, I think in Rhode Island, and there's some in New Jersey. So I think wind will be a big deal, and perhaps bigger than solar, partly because there just will be a lot of development of wind, and partly because wind generates more of the year than solar. The wind isn't always blowing, but there's more wind blowing more often than there is sun shining.
We're going to wrap up Experts Corner in one moment. Do we have another question? I don't want to cut off any questions. But Fran, before yes, we have one from Karen. Karen from North Belmore. Mepham High School graduate in 1972.
I have a question. I've seen on the Mass Pike there are these solar panels, and I was just wondering who is responsible for that and where the energy is going.
Yes, a lot of them are from energy service companies. Amoresco is one in particular. That's headquartered in Natick, I believe. And they install them along there very much as they would on an old landfill or any land. The developers are now running around looking for good open land that's near a distribution line. And so the economics are quite attractive for just spreading those panels as far as you can spread them. And so they've leased land from the pike. It's quite exciting, really.
Okay, so Fran's going to stay with us so we can ask questions later. But we're going to wrap up Experts Corner. So a big round of applause for Fran Cummings.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I get the milk now?
If you'd like some. So you stay here.
All right. Thank you.
We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors, and then it's time for the Electricity Show Orchestra.
Additional funding for the Electricity Show is provided by the Charlie Card Store. All of your Charlie Card needs at one convenient location. Check out our new line of greeting cards. Happy birthday. Sorry I missed your party. My train never showed. And here is the Electricity Show Orchestra.
I knew this day would have to come. I'm not surprised it came so soon. We did just fine with room to run. Not so good stuck in this room. You have to say we had some laughs. Or we shared a dirty joke or two. But I knew this day would have to come. I'm not surprised it came so soon. 'Cause you can't see what you don't see. So you think that those that see are simply seeing things that aren't there. If you'd open up your eyes, you would be mildly surprised to find the things you see are like music to your ears. So let's turn on the lights, my friend. It's getting awfully dark out there. I'll still sing my spirit song. Oh, I just won't sing it here. You can't hear the sounds out there. You think that those that hear are simply hearing voices in their heads. If you gently close your eyes, you'd be mildly surprised to find the things you hear are music to your ears. And so it's time to say goodbye. Oh, I've outlived my welcome here. The songs I sing have the same tune. Oh, you've tired of them, that's clear. 'Cause you don't know what you don't know, so you think that those that know are simply knowing truths that aren't there. If you'd open up your mind, well, I think you just might find the things you know are music to your ears. Knew this day would have to come. I didn't know it'd come so soon. Thank you. Thank you. The Electricity Show Orchestra. Thank you, guys. Nice job. Thank you. We'll hear from our sponsor, and then we'll move on to Fun with
Additional
Bill.
funding for the Electricity Show is provided by the Massachusetts Milk Company, your one and only milk company since the late 1800s. And now it's time for Fun with Bills.
And welcome to Fun with Bills. Now, just which bills are we going to have fun with? Is it Bill Clinton? I don't think so. Could be Bill Russell, one of my favorite basketball players of all time. Bill Gates, no. Bill Belichick, definitely not even Bill Nye, the science guy. We are going to have fun with our electric bill. Thank you, thank you. So in this segment of the show, we view all the issues we talk about through the lens of the electric bill. So what's the information on our electric bill? First, it's going to give us some general information. It's going to give us some information on the electricity we use and the cost of that electricity. The electric bill is our invoice for the electric service we receive. When we didn't have to care much about electricity, it didn't make that big a difference if you understood it. As we move forward and it becomes more and more hot ticket item, I think we really have to understand the information provided. So your electric bill, this is my mom, Pearl Pull Meter. That's her, she was getting married. She lives on High Voltage Lane. That's coincidental, I think. Okay, so this is from Eversource. What do they tell us? I'm not sure you can see that, but they want you to know that there's information about consumer rights accompanying the bill, that they offer a variety of payment plans, budget billing if you want to spread out, general information. This is a key piece of information we're going to return to later. New basic service pricing will take effect on July 1st and are available on the bill. We're going to talk about that later when we talk about the cost of electricity. What else does it tell you? It gives you your account number. Very important if you want to talk to someone with the company or you want to switch to a competitive supplier. It tells you what kind of customer you are. My mom is a rate A1 residential. That's important because that determines how much you pay for your electricity. We'll talk about that later. There's a meter read date. My mom's meter was last read on June 9th. In the old days, the electric companies used to hire people who would walk around and read your meters and write it down. These days, they drive around in trucks and they capture signals that are sent out by your meters. And it tells you billing date. So for my mom, the meter was read the 9th, the bill was sent out the 10th. General information. Now let's talk about electricity used. And then hopefully we'll have time, we can discuss it in the context of distributed generation. So it tells me on this June 9th, my mom's meter read was 74,180. They compare it to your meter read from the previous month. This number here, 73,611. And so for the 31-day billing period, my mom used 569 kilowatt hours. Now you can see they now move that to the side. And then they give you 12 or 13 months of information so you can get a sense of how your usage is going. So you can see that with my mom, June, May, pretty much stayed the same. When it gets to the winter months, her usage goes up. She has medical equipment that requires her to heat water outside. In other words, she has a hot tub. Now, if you're an electric heating customer, you would expect that same kind of thing. If you're a big air conditioner customer, you would expect your usage to increase in the summer. Finally, they'll let you know that next meter read date will be July 9th, and we'll start all over again. So now let's talk about cost of electricity. This is really a key piece, and I actually think the bill is easy to read, just doesn't think so. Two parts of the bill, delivery services and supplier services. Now remember in Electricity 101, we discussed how there's really three services, supplier, delivery, and billing. It turns out, for the purpose of your bill, the company includes billing with delivery services. So the first charge you're going to see on your bill is this customer charge. It's $6.43 for a residential customer, per customer. And this allows the company to collect all the costs it incurs to install your meter, to read your meter, to make your bills, to send it. All the kind of stuff is recovered through this. And this $6.43 is set by the government. The company provides information on how much it costs them, and then the government has to approve it. Now, the next two charges you're going to see are distribution and transmission. This is more typical delivery service stuff. Transmission wires, Fran had mentioned them before, take electricity from where it's generated and bring it to our neighborhood substations, they're called. Distribution from the neighborhood substations into our homes. Here you'll see that it's a cents per kilowatt hour basis. 760 kilowatt hours, that might be the wrong number. And again, you can see for distribution, 6.167 cents, transmission 1.915. Again, for distribution, let's look at it. This allows the company to collect all the money it needs to provide distribution services, all the salaries, all the facilities, all this kind of stuff. Again, the government approves it. These are regulated rates that the government regulates because we have no choice, just like the Massachusetts Milk Company delivering milk 100 years ago, but to get our delivery services. So you can see now what the monthly charge is. These are really the key delivery service parts of your bill. Two other parts show up, which might confuse people. There's renewable energy and energy efficiency. These are dollars that the company collects and pass on to others. The renewable energy charge they pass on to an entity called the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, who invested in a lot of renewable projects. The energy efficiency, they invest themselves in energy efficiency programs. Again, you'll see these are all cents per kilowatt hour basis. And on the right, you can see your total bill. You could see that for the delivery services, the distribution charge dominates the bill. So in total, our delivery services, my mom's delivery services were about $30 for this month. Now let's look at supplier services. Just like we talked about with milk, you can pick a competitive supplier. My mom is stuck with basic service, so this shows up as 15 cents per kilowatt hour. This was the big news everybody heard back in January. We'd never seen prices quite so high, and we'll talk about this in a second. So whereas the delivery service of the bill was $70, it's $114 for the supply service. This is a flip that's recently happened. It used to be your delivery service cost you more than your supply service. So this gave you a total bill, my mom, for the month of June, or for the June bill, of about $184. Now remember, before we saw that Eversource was telling us new basic service rates will take effect in July. So here's your June bill. Now let's look at what's going to happen in July. Basic service is going to go down from 15 cents to 10 cents. And we could talk about that a little bit. And so when we look at our July bill, our supplier charges will now not be $114. They'll only be $76. And our total bill, the delivery services doesn't change, because those only change infrequently when the government decides that new rates are warranted. And so our total bill will go from $184 to $146. So that's the bill. I'm going to talk to Fran. Any questions out there? I know in a way it seems like a lot of information, but I think the key things to remember is, first of all, residential customers pay different rates than commercial customers, just because the costs incurred are a little bit different. And that for the most part, the rates are approved by the government, and Eversource has very little discretion in what to charge. Any questions? Okay. So Fran, let's...
You did actually have a question.
Yes, Nancy.
You said that you were going to explain why the huge rate hike last January. I was a little suspicious personally. I might be wrong. I might just be paranoid. But I know there was a big pressure to have the natural gas pipelines come through. And then all of a sudden, oh, if that can't come through, your rates are going to go way up. I thought that might have been a scare tactic. Is that true or no?
So let's talk about that. I'll start, Fran, and then you jump in. It used to be in New England, our supply rates, let's just call them basic service rates, were higher in the summer than in the winter, because that's when our load is the highest because of air conditioning. So it used to be flipped. Our summer months cost us a lot. It went back down in the winter. It turns out, because of issues around climate change, we now, our resource portfolio that provides our generation is dominated by natural gas power plants. So now during the winter, the power plants need natural gas to create electricity, but many of us, most of us are using natural gas to heat our homes. And there's competition for that natural gas. And when that competition occurs, we get it first to heat our homes. And there are some natural gas plants that cannot run because they don't have enough natural gas. And so we have to rely on, I'll finish the story, then I'll turn to you to see if you can explain it maybe better. We have to rely on more expensive. So natural gas is a good thing because it's a cleaner source of electricity than oil, certainly than coal. They tend to be more efficient power plants, I think. But now we've set up this dynamic where there's competition between. Now where the natural gas plant comes in is that you hear all of this hoopla about there's enough natural gas brought to New England's doorstep. We just don't have the pipeline capacity to bring it in. So what I would say to you is, no, I don't think you're correct that it was a scare tactic. I think there's a lot of discussion about whether the natural gas pipeline is an important investment. It's going to be a huge investment. And I think it really depends on how people see the future of, is natural gas going to continue? Remember we talked about fracking. It's a very inexpensive source of energy now. Will it continue to be so? David, do you have a question? Or you just, I didn't know if you...
I just wanted if he could talk a little bit about heat pumps or geothermal. Are they really worth it? Are they more efficient than I have an old gas furnace that I hate, and it doesn't really heat the house well.
Well, I could answer that. Geothermal can be very expensive because you have to drill a well, basically. But it's site-specific, so it's worth checking out, get somebody out and find out what it would cost. It's very efficient because you're basically taking 50-degree water from under the ground and just having to heat it up a little to warm your house. Heat pumps are very efficient, so I just bought a heat pump to replace an old oil furnace, and it's an air-to-air heat pump, so I don't have to pay for the well to use groundwater. It's not as efficient as the groundwater, but the technology is way improved, and it's very comfortable, and I don't have the greenhouse gas emissions from the oil. And I've electrified my usage, so now when we get solar out on the grid, we can clean up the electricity. So it's part of a sort of a climate strategy to use more electricity rather than fossil fuel. It works.
So interestingly, when I was talking to Fran, he mentioned, sort of three things. If you have solar panels and you can store it, you can create enough electricity, you can provide your own electricity, you can operate these heat pumps to heat your house, and you can invest in an electric car and charge it at home. So what does that do to our electric bill? It's going to make your kilowatt hour skyrocket, right? Because you're using this. So where are the savings? Well, the savings are in your natural gas or oil bill. Your savings are on your gasoline bill. And if we clean up our resource portfolio, we're providing all this in a cleaner way.
Right. And if you generate enough solar energy, you might actually be buying fewer kilowatt hours from the grid if you can generate it at home.
That's right.
And that might go a long way toward fueling your heat pump and your electric car. Okay. So there's a lot of changes that will affect the bill, and they're kind of hard to visualize with just an electric bill because you get all these different fuels involved.
That's right. And just to wrap this up, exactly what Fran said. That's the beauty of distributed generation, is that your kilowatt hour usage just goes way down, and in some months could be negative. And indeed, you're getting paid by the electric company. So, any more questions? Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap up Fun with Bills. And hear once more from the Electricity Show Orchestra. So, once again, my dear friend Fran Cummings, I think did a great job.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barry.
Great job.
This was great. This was great.
And I'm going to ask my fellow members of the Electricity Orchestra to join, and we're going to finish up with one more song.
Why can't I believe you? Why is it hard for me to trust the words you say? Why do I feel it's just a game we play? It's not the words that you tell me, it's more the things I feel you leave unsaid. I sense so many thoughts stuck inside your head. Everything's fine, everything's alright. That's what you say to me. But something's amiss, something's not quite right, and that's what's bothering me. You have all the answers. You state your case in a thoughtful and thorough way. Why then is it hard for me to trust the words you say? This brings us to the end of another episode of the Electricity Show. I want to thank my expert guest, Fran Cummings. Fran, you did a great job. I really appreciate your help. I want to thank the Electricity Show Orchestra, Ryan Plaschka on bass, Jim Nicolora on the drums. Thank you, guys. We're getting better each time. I want to thank all the people who are helping out on the floor. James, I get your name right, James, on the camera. Walter, Julia. I want to thank my lovely wife,
who's the floor director for the show. Back in the studio, my extraordinary daughter, Hannah, plays the role of director. My co-producer, Michelle, was the announcer. I want to thank Spencer for his awesome audio work. A round of applause for all of them. I want to thank the folks at ACMI for let me use their facilities. And a special thank you, of course, to Jonathan, without whom this does not happen. I leave the best for last. Studio audience, thank you so much. Thank you so much. The studio audience really is the heart and soul of the show, and I appreciate you coming out, supporting us, and asking great questions. I hope the viewing audience found this to be informational, educational, and I hope the Electricity Show has left you better prepared to explore your relationship with the energy you consume. Blah, 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 blah. That's what you say to me. But something about your blush don't seem quite right, and that's what's worrying me. You have all the power. You only tell me things you think I need to know. I'm wondering about the things you think I need not know. Why can't I believe you? Why can't I believe you? Why can't I believe you? Thank you. The Electricity Show was taped before a live studio audience.